everyone. Welcome to another segment of Plugged In, and today I'm sitting with Lady Starlight.
Well, hello, thanks for having me.
Pleasure. You might recognize Lady Starlight's work on stroboscopic artifacts and figures, and today Lady Starlight's going to sit and talk to us about her modular setup for her live work and studio work. Could you tell us a little bit about what's your setup that you have out here with us today?
Okay, so I'm kind of functioning like a band. So my setup for live is the same for the studio. So everything works together in a way that I can perform live and record tracks at the same time. So very time efficient. In terms of equipment, I do most of my sequencing on the Electron machine drum. My main source of drums is the MFB Tanzbär, and then I have a whole lot going on in this case over here. And with the machine drum, while it's called a machine drum, I use it mostly as a sampler for my leads, and it gives a great like a 12-bit sample. There's no USB or any kind of memory card capability, so it's either a sysx transfer or recording it directly into the machine, which is actually great. It sounds better and it's faster.
So do you normally record in samples into it directly?
Yeah. So all the stuff I recorded has come from some input. And I have the MFB Tanzbär as my main source of percussion, but mostly the kick drum. This is my very favorite kick drum in the world.
And I can see as well you have two external effects units going on.
This is just two of them. I also have I'm a big fan of guitar effects, especially when you're working with like the dynamic range of a modular synthesizer. They function really well since they're meant for guitar. So I have the Strymon. Strymon is my go-to source for pedals because they just make a magical sounding thing. I don't know what it is. So the dig is my delay, and blue sky and the reverb. Cool. And they're simple. I don't like stomp boxes because I like to have a knob for everything.
So you're not running any MIDI into your effects unit, so you're going off by ear?
I am indeed. And I keep meaning every time to like make some kind of like notation on the pedal, because literally if I'm doing a sound check of like where is the actual like, okay, this is the dotted eighth note. It can lead to some interesting things live.
What would be, let's say, your starting point in, let's say, composing a track? Where would you go from?
So since I'm making techno, I start with the kick drum. That's just basically like a metronome. So, and that's always coming from the Tanzbär. And then if I need a reference point for where it is, then you know in relation to a 4, you know, where that is going. And then from there, it can go a few different ways. The lead is always the most important thing in my track, and then the percussion accents the lead all the time. I'm trying to kind of mix it up a bit and starting to focus maybe on the percussion, but it's all about the lead. Because all the techno that I like has a really strong lead. I like a lot of arpeggios. So, you know, you always do whatever your ears focus on about techno that you like is what you're gonna, it's the star of the show. I usually, I guess, start with verbose, my one and only oscillator in my Euro rack, which is very unusual to only have one, but it's technically two, is the complex oscillator by Verbose Electronics. So I'll start there. Let's see, here we go. And then at the moment, I'm using another verbose thing, because you'll find with modular that really modules of the same company definitely sound best with modules of their own kind. And really, it's subtle, but it makes a huge difference. So this is a sequencer. So here's my arpeggio. And I love odd step numbers. This is a 5-step sequence. I think almost everything when I'm trying to like edit a track, I record everything onto 3 tracks. Just 1, 2, 3 audio files. That's my track. It's the bass drum, percussion, and then all of the lead sounds in one, which is not so easy. So I had to be really careful on the mixing desk that I'm EQing it right.
Would you do the arrangement focusing on your lead synth sounds from, let's say, your beginning to the end of the track, and recording all the automation and the changes, and then do the percussion? Or what's your work process in that sense?
I do the percussion. I record it all in one take. Everything is just happening at one time. I think that the more you do post-production with arrangement, the less character it has, the less energy it has, the less magic it has. So I try to do everything together, at least as a sketch, and then sometimes I'll need to go back and re-record things. I try to do it in one take, but if it's a little bit more complicated and requires more than two hands, which things often do, I'll record the lead with like a shell of the percussion, you know, about like a hi-hat or something, and then a few things to make sure everything sounds good, but I won't worry about the arrangement of the percussion if the lead needs to be modulated and changed and needs two hands to make it interesting. And then I'll go back and re-record the percussion properly. But I try to not even do that because, again, it's all about that moment. My best tracks are always the ones that are just like, in that moment, I've just written the track, boom, first take. It's always the best one. When you're programming everything in a computer, it's a bit difficult to get that kind of energy that I like. I listen to a lot of older techno when you were recording everything onto ADAT. You know, that's the stuff where you hear mistakes. And that's the best. Little flaws where you're like, oh, those are the things that were, in my mind, are very exciting about music. Because it sounds like a person and not a machine.
Okay, what would be the most important thing, if you could, that you think is the most important thing for a live setup to keep in mind?
Having two hands, that's all. You know, you have, that's the bottom line, is that people think that the more gear you have, the better it is. That could not be further from the truth. The less gear you have, the better it is. And that's why working with modular is not about like being cool or, you know, it's actually a very, very, very practical thing to do because you can get all this stuff into one thing, that you can access everything in a small footprint. So it's practically better than having a bunch of machines. I approach modular very functionally and not very esoteric like a lot of people do. I'm like, I need it to just function and happen in a consistent way and execute things. So that's the way my case is set up. And you need to have the ability to make sure, whatever it is, you have the ability to change a knob quickly and have something happen so that you're not like, you know, we've all seen live sets where you're like, okay, wow, that hi-hat's been going on for 30 minutes. You know, when you're performing live, there's so many things to manage. It's like cooking, you know what I mean? You're in a kitchen and you're like, oh crap, the garlic is burning, and oh, I didn't wash the spinach yet, and the water's boiling. So like, that's welcome to a live techno performance. Is very much like trying to juggle everything and making sure nothing is going on for too long, which is extremely difficult. And you just have to do it all the time. That's the only way. I don't DJ really anymore because if I don't perform live all the time, I'm not as good at it. The more you do it, the better. It's just all about time of getting and mastering your setup. Don't change a lot of things. Don't get new gear for as long as you can. Just focus on what you have, because you could have better gear, but if you know your gear, your piece of equipment, while it may not, in whatever it is, may not be the best, you'll get a better result from the equipment that you know rather than the best equipment.
To keep the energy going, and what I mean with that is, let's say for transitions and subtle details in lifting energy or dropping energy without changing a sequence, for example, what are your go-to approaches or things you set
those
up?
are the most important thing about performing live techno. So let's go back to my track. So let me take the kick drum out. So this is my, it's coming from the verbose complex oscillator, which is, you can hear, like an arpeggio type. So then I have, see with modular, that's the best thing about it, is that you can create so many things that with just one flip, you know, you can change everything without getting too module specific, which I think most people are not terribly interested in. So you can, this is, so I've patched this other sequencer to create an accent. It's not even an accent, actually. It's changing the timbre, but then it gives a. So this is not only like a CV sequencer. It also, you can patch all this sequence to anything, and then you can just change it very, very easily. So, and then also, so just having a bunch of things going on at one time, and this is another CV patch that is controlling the filter. One variation. And it's all like these, the modulation is on a 5-step sequence. So the more different sequence length you have, then this will go on in its own and be shifting. So it's like, okay, cool. How little things can I do with my hands, and how many things can those create sonically? And then, of course, which one's this? Works every time. Reverb on it. Boom. But when in doubt,
Reverb it out.
No, I'm a bit anti-reverb. There's too much reverb in techno, and that's the dig, the delay. Because you can just hear it. Don't you hear how how spread out it is? It's great. It sounds so full. I have a few reverb jokes, but there's an overuse of reverb, I believe, in techno. So making sure that you have a lot, this is where having 4 sequencers works, because if something's not, you have an ability to have them all interact. With the machine drum, obviously there's the decay on the sample, but also an LFO that you program in a really interesting way that you can control anything. So, that's one dial. So you really have to plan a lot in advance to get a live set that can follow a DJ set, because the DJ set is really on point. The tracks, they're finished tracks, they're mastered. Coming on after a DJ the dip in energy is always really difficult. It's not about the technicality, it's also about the ability to project confidence and yeah, this is amazing, because you always have that people have to adjust to the new dynamics that they're hearing, or any dynamics that they're hearing. So when you're in front of a bunch of people, you suddenly, no matter how confident you are, all of a sudden everything is totally different. Everything goes out the window. So if you don't have a safety net of some kind, where you have stuff that's sequenced out, it does not work, and it can become extremely boring, because you're trying to think of this, and meanwhile, again, you have the hi-hat going, and you're like, oh God. So it's not very good for the audience, I find, and for the energy. But again, it also depends. It's the kind of, the equipment you're using is a huge part of what your sound is, and it's a huge part of the way that you think and the way that you go about music, which is just as important to the sound. How you mentally go through sequencing, and you know, it's an integral part, so to the finished product. So I gravitate towards sequencers which have a lot of programming capability, but not so much a on-the-fly thing going on. I like features, intricate programming features. This just is my brain. So for me, with the gear that I have, doing any kind of live sequencing would be the most horrible idea ever. I'd be like in this sub-menu of like, oh God. We'd be like, okay, can you put the kick drum back in? So again, it depends on how your brain works and what sequencer you use. Make a huge difference in how you're going to approach and tweak your set. So,
what about percussion when it comes to hi-hats? I've heard of your stuff that you like to keep it minimal and so
I
forth.
love me some hi-hats. I love me some 16th note hi-hats. You'll never hear a track of mine that don't have it. It's my favorite thing. I've done tracks where literally it's the only thing that happens, which I just can't get away from it. And I can't at some point not use a 909 open hat. I love them so much. Certain things. The 909 percussion is just techno. You know what I mean? To me, it's all about that and then slight variations. I actually have modules in here. I have the 909 hats, the 808 hats. This is how much I like hi-hats. I have 2 different hi-hat modules, and a bass drum out of this entire thing. It's taking up that much space. That's how much I like hi-hats.
When it comes to other percussions, do you use any other types of percussion?
Oh yeah, I do actually.
Well?
I had forgot to mention, although I said machine drum, there's no drums, that's actually not true. They're sample drums. They don't come from the internal engine. So how I work it, and this is for live purposes, this is why I did it this way. Half of it is lead sounds, and then the other half is percussion. This is also a safeguard against when you get to a gig and something goes wrong. And you're like, wow, I don't have any drums. You don't ever want to put yourself in that position. So you want to spread out very important things. And also when you're doing things live, like you have to make transitions. So you need things to play off each other, or you'll just have like this abrupt transition. So you can never rely on only one sequencer, unfortunately. How I've grown over time is had the ability to perform something live, and then I'll want to record it, but I'll also record something and then want to perform it live. So it's like this nice circle that kind of works all together. Thank you. You're too kind. I hear everything.